So we've gotten through EQ, dynamic processing, delays, simple balancing, panning, talking about mixing. The next step we're going to look at is automation. So the definition of automation from the Merriam-Webster's dictionary: the technique of making an apparatus, a process, or a system operate automatically. The state of being operated automatically. Automatically controlled operation of an apparatus, process, or system by mechanical or electronic devices that take the place of human labor. So we can use this technique, process of automation, to have our computer adjust our mixes, adjust any parameter on the fly. Commercial mixes are full of automation, as opposed to leaving a set balance, kind of a static mix. Automating mixes brings a certain life, adds dynamics, cleanliness to a mix. Prior to DAWs, engineers would what's called ride levels on a mixer as they're being printed to tape. This picture kind of depicts what would be going on. This tape reel in the back would be recording the left-right mix coming out of the console, and the engineers or group of musicians would be adjusting balances, EQs on the fly in real time, being printed to that tape. Now DAWs, digital audio workstations, allow us to automate virtually any parameter in our session, be it a specific parameter of a delay. Volume is definitely the most common automation, and we can do this during the process, after the process, and not be constrained to automate everything we want to in real time. We can do one parameter at a time, go back, adjust a different parameter, and the computer records these automation moves so that the next time it plays back, the computer automatically recreates these mix decisions that we were performing or writing in real time or on the fly. Now, it is the mix engineer's responsibility to allow these arrangements and musical events to breathe. Specific musical events, maybe a drop, an impact, need to be on top of the mix, or different dynamic changes in different sections of a song, depending on the arrangement, need to stand out. They need to have a certain life to them, and this is where automation really comes in handy. The dynamics change dramatically for the better when automating. It creates a professional sounding, well-balanced mix, more so than just setting the faders, leaving them, and bouncing them. This enhances the dynamics, enhances the life, the breathability of the composition and arrangement. So why automate? Again, it creates movement. It creates an expanded dynamic range. You can use automation to blend parts, maybe backing vocals. You can automate the different parts to blend together, or exposing parts, say in a guitar solo. If you want that more on top, you can automate the volume of that guitar solo up during the solo, bring it back down afterwards. And once you do this, write in these automation points, on the next time the computer plays back the composition, it will automatically adjust to what you had done previously. Manual balancing, especially on vocals. Just by nature, acoustic instruments have some contrast. There's a human element to it. But maybe a singer sung a certain part quieter, certain words or phrases quieter. You can automate these volume changes for a more balanced, for a more congruent performance. It helps create dynamic contrast. Say you want a chorus louder, different parts come up more. If you want a drop to back down in the mix, if you want a hit to be more exposed. And you can also automate effects, choruses, reverbs. Say you want the feedback on a delay very exposed or apparent at one point. You can automate this, even just if it's a single note. Some examples: raise or lower specific instruments during sections. Again, say you want a chorus to hit more. You can bring up the instruments just for the chorus, bring them back down for the verses. You want to change the arrangement and you want certain instruments muted in certain sections. You can automate the mutes so that the instrument disappears in certain sections. Bring out a sparser arrangement. You can pan an instrument from ear to ear. Say you want a synthesizer pan back and forth from the left and right very rapidly, you can automate those pan controls. Change the EQ or timbre for certain instruments on certain sections. If you want piano brighter during the chorus or a little bit duller during the verses, you can automate the EQ. Level out contrast during performances. Again, going back to the example of a vocal. If the musician plays certain phrases or notes a little bit quieter by accident, instead of compensating with compression, you can automate the volume before going into the compressor to give a more natural sounding compression after the fact. Again, you could automate effects. Maybe you want distortion on a bass guitar only during the choruses and you want it clean in the verses. You can automate that. These are just a few examples. It is really limitless what you can do with automation. Automation engine. So how does automation work? All parameters on any track, any control and an effect, the pans, the levels, they're all free to move prior to writing automation. You could go into your DAW and adjust on the fly. But once you write in automation data, those controls are bound to the sequence that's recorded. So it's going to want to follow that automation line. All of a sudden that parameter becomes locked until you write in more automation on top of it. The automation only occurs when the computer is told to timestamp these positions of the given controls. And this is a little graphical representation of what an automation line looks like. It's represented by a line, and these points, these dots, follow this linear curve. And that's what the computer is going to follow once it's told to do so. Further automation data can be adjusted. Again, if this is a volume automation curve right here, I'm not going to be able to control the level anymore unless I write in more automation. So you could do this on the fly. You can do this during the mix stage, a combination of the two. Once you get your basic sound, once you start automating, really getting into the mix, that's where the real creativity really starts to happen with the mix. So we can control the automation in one of two ways: performing the automation or drawing in automation. Drawing the automation allows us to pencil in automation along that visual representation I showed you before. This is a screenshot of Pro Tools. We can pull up the automation line and use our pencil tool to actually draw in automation points, or our hand tool to move the automation points around. I'm going to be starting other playlists that are DAW specific, so I'll have video today going in depth of Pro Tools automation, Logic, Studio One, any other DAWs you guys are using that you want me to delve into, let me know and I'll do so. Each DAW is going to have a slightly different workflow. You can see here in Pro Tools, in our pencil tool, we'll have different options to create automation. Performing automation is when the automation, we call it, is written in during playback through either a controller or manipulating an on-screen display in real time. So I could have a mixer capable of drawing an automation, and I could actually be physically moving the faders, writing in that automation. Or I can go in on a plugin or a fader on the DAW, use my mouse, click on it, start dragging it up and down, performing the automation while the track is being played back. There's some pros and cons to both. Some may take longer than others. Say if you want to mute a whole section, it might make more sense to draw in that mute. It'll just be quicker. Writing in automation gives us that human feel, that playability. If you're a musician, you probably want to be grabbing something physical, actually performing your mix in real time. Sometimes it gives you a more musical sensibility, but if you want to really get narrow in, get real surgical with it, you might want to be drawing in the automation. Depends on your workflow, comfortability, and application. So automation modes. There are typically 5 universal modes selectable per track in all professional DAWs. These offer varying workflows for performing automation, not penciling it in. These are universal automation modes for any DAW. First one we have off. That'll give us normal playback. This is graphically represented down here. First automation mode off, normal playback. If you turn off automation, any automation you wrote prior is going to neglect. It'll give you full control of any parameters that you had previously wrote in automation. It's just going to play back one-to-one where the fader is, no automation. The next automation mode is read, which is what your DAW typically defaults to. And it's going to read anything in the automation line. If there's no automation, again, it's the equivalent of having it off. You're going to have full control of all your parameters, and it's just going to play through whatever is written in your automation. If you do have automation written in, it's going to follow that along. Touch mode. This is probably the most common, most useful, offers less room for error. In touch mode is reading whatever automation data you already have in until you grab that control. You physically click on the fader or you grab it on your hardware controller and start writing in automation. If it's in touch mode, I'm clicking on a fader, moving it up and down, adjusting the level, then it's writing in automation. But when I let go of that control, it automatically reverts back into read mode and reading the automation. It's going to follow along whatever automation you had in there already. Latch mode, similar to touch mode, except once we grab that control, it's in write mode, and when we let go, it's continuing to write in new automation. So if we're in latch mode, I want to adjust to the level of something, I grab the fader, bring it up, and when I let go, it'll stay at whatever level I let go at. And it'll continue to write in that new automation volume until the playback stops. Write mode you always want to be careful with. That's the last one. Write mode is continuously writing in automation data. So the playback starts, it's writing in that level. I can grab that fader, move it, let go. It'll continue writing in that automation data. Why is it something to be careful with? Say I'm starting it at minus 10 dB. I'm playing through. I want the outro to be at minus 5, so I bump up the fader to minus 5. I stop the playback. And when I start again, if I want to hear back what I just did, if I don't take it out of write mode, you want to always take it out of write mode, bring it back into read mode, because if I leave it in write mode, start over again, it's going to start writing in automation throughout the whole track at minus 5 dB. So that's something you want to be careful of. I usually leave it in either read mode or touch. There are two different ways we can write in or perform automation data. One, again, just grabbing whatever controls are on screen with our mouse. And we also use hardware controllers. Hardware controllers are used to input automation data, and it's something we could touch, physically move, physically perform on. They can be as big as a large format console or smaller than a laptop. Here's a picture of the DigiDesign D-Command, which is essentially a full console. It looks like a console. However, it's only used as a hardware controller to control automation. There's no inputs and outputs. It's a physical, it's only a controller for your DAW. And you can see it has multiple parameters, programmable buttons and knobs. Most importantly, the faders, so you could actually be physically mixing. This down here is the PreSonus fader port. Very tiny. It's only a single fader. It's bankable, so you can assign that fader to any track, write in automation, one track at a time. It has transport down here. In many studios, control surfaces have replaced large format consoles. Some can be cheaper, some are expandable. Keeps everything in the box, so to speak, so you're not busting to outboard gear, you're not coloring your tracks with consoles, preamps, compressors. Everything's in the computer, so you could easily transfer your session. So again, I'm going to be recording tutorials for a few different DAWs, starting with automation. I'm going to be uploading them to their own individual playlists on YouTube. So whatever DAW you're using, you can reference those playlists for how to access the automation features and how to use them.